What if the reason this chicken farm has 0 humans in it has almost nothing to do with saving money, and everything to do with keeping one specific virus from ever reaching another human being again? Look at what you're seeing right now. Hundreds of newly hatched chicks moving through a fully automated Chinese facility, scanned, fed, and monitored without a single human hand ever touching them. That's not a coincidence or a cost-cutting flex. It traces back to a virus that has already killed hundreds of people through exactly the kind of contact this farm was specifically built to eliminate. You've probably assumed automation on a farm is mostly about replacing expensive labor with cheap robots. That's part of it. But in China's poultry industry specifically, there's a second reason that has almost nothing to do with cost, and it's a lot scarier than a payroll problem. In the next few minutes, the virus that's already killed over 600 people through direct contact with poultry, why researchers now seriously study something called lights-out farming, why China has pushed this kind of automation harder than almost anywhere else, and why the same pressure is starting to show up on American farms too, for reasons that have nothing to do with China at all. Since 2004, a strain of bird flu called H5N1 has forced the culling of more than 40 million birds in China alone. That's the version that mostly stays inside poultry. A second strain, H7N9, doesn't stay contained. Between 2013 and 2018, it infected over 1,500 people in China directly, killing more than 600 of them. In almost every documented case, the person got sick from direct contact with live poultry at a farm, a transport truck, or a wet market. Picture being a small poultry farmer in Jiangsu province back in 2013. You've raised chickens the way your family always has, walking through the coop every morning and checking on birds by hand. Then a virus starts moving through farms just like yours, one that can jump from a sick bird directly into a human lung. A study surveying farmers across Jiangsu and Anhui found that nearly all of them fundamentally changed how they worked afterward, adding masks, disinfectant at every doorway, and in many cases deliberately limiting how much time they spent near their own animals out of simple fear for their own lives. That's the actual engineering problem Chinese poultry automation is trying to solve. Researchers have a name for the end goal: lights-out production, a facility that runs poultry operations essentially without a single person setting foot inside. Every human who walks into a poultry house is a potential carrier, walking disease between flocks on their boots, their hands, their clothes. Remove the human, and you remove one of the biggest vectors for the next outbreak to spread, or worse, to mutate into something that jumps to people more easily. Here's what that actually looks like on the ground. Sensor-equipped robots move through the facility on their own, checking temperature, humidity, and air quality in real time. Camera systems trained to recognize individual birds can flag a sick or injured chick within hours instead of waiting for a human worker's next scheduled walkthrough, which might not come for a full day. Some systems can already identify a bird showing early symptoms and isolate it automatically before anyone would have physically noticed anything wrong. Some units carry sensor arrays that continuously track carbon dioxide, ammonia, and humidity, adjusting ventilation automatically instead of waiting for a person to notice birds panting from heat stress. Others are built specifically to locate and remove dead or dying birds from the floor, a task that used to require a human worker walking the length of a poultry house multiple times a day, breathing the same air as tens of thousands of birds for hours at a stretch. None of this requires a person to walk the floor at all. These camera systems aren't just counting birds either. They're trained on thousands of hours of footage showing what a healthy chick looks like when it moves, eats, and rests, so they can flag the subtle differences. A slight limp, a chick that's stopped eating, one sitting apart from the group that a tired human worker on their 15th walkthrough of the day might easily miss. This isn't only happening in China. Researchers at Georgia Tech and Cornell in the United States are working on nearly identical systems for the same underlying reason. But China has pushed this kind of automation into commercial use more aggressively than most other countries, for a specific reason. It's a country that has already lived through, in documented detail, what happens when this goes wrong. Over 29 million small-scale Chinese poultry farmers, each running flocks of under 2,000 birds, represent exactly the kind of decentralized, high human contact system where a virus like H7N9 finds its openings. Large-scale, sealed, automated facilities are the direct response to that risk. So why hasn't this fully automated model taken over everywhere already? Building a facility like this from scratch costs significantly more upfront than a traditional barn with human workers walking it by hand. For a small family farm running a couple thousand birds, that math often doesn't work yet. It's the large industrial operations, the ones raising millions of birds at a time, where the cost of full automation is easiest to justify, and where a single uncontrolled outbreak would be the most catastrophic. If you want to see exactly how these systems actually catch a sick bird before a human ever could, subscribe, because that's the part most coverage of this topic skips entirely. Here's the part that should make you sit up. The United States is currently in the middle of its own bird flu crisis, the one responsible for the egg prices that have been spiking at your grocery store. Tens of millions of egg-laying hens have been culled across American farms over the past few years to contain outbreaks. Since 2022, American farms have culled well over 100 million birds, trying to contain repeated outbreaks, and egg prices have swung wildly as a result, at one point more than doubling within a single year. Every time a major outbreak hits a U.S. facility, the standard response is to cull the entire flock to stop the spread, which is part of why a single infected farm can move grocery prices nationwide within weeks. The U.S. hasn't built lights-out facilities at anywhere near the scale China has, partly because the human infection numbers here have stayed much lower so far. But the underlying math is the same everywhere. Every human who walks into a barn full of birds is a variable you can't fully control, and automation is the most direct way anyone has found to remove that variable completely. There's a real uncomfortable question sitting underneath all of this. A farm with zero humans in it sounds unsettling, almost dystopian, right up until you remember the actual alternative. A farm where people, birds, and a virus with pandemic potential are all sharing the same air. Once you frame it that way, the robots start looking less like a symbol of jobs disappearing and a lot more like a fire door nobody wants to think about until the day they desperately need it. There's an irony hiding in that same question. The usual animal welfare argument points toward more natural, more hands-on farming, chickens raised the old way, with real human attention. The virus doesn't care about any of that. The exact same close, hands-on relationship between farmer and flock that sounds humane on paper is also the single biggest risk factor for the kind of outbreak that's already killed hundreds of people directly. Sometimes the more humane-sounding option and the safer option point in completely opposite directions. And nobody built these automated systems because they wanted to. They built them because the alternative kept making people sick. If you're the one paying more for eggs at the store right now, this is part of why. The old system, human workers moving between flocks, checking on animals by hand, feels more comforting to imagine. It's also precisely the system that keeps producing outbreaks large enough to wipe out tens of millions of birds at a time, which is exactly what's been driving your grocery bill up. If you want to see which other everyday industries are quietly being redesigned around the exact same remove the human, remove the risk logic, subscribe, because farming was just the first place it became impossible to ignore. A virus that mostly used to make headlines in China is now shaping how chickens get raised on a completely different continent. not because anyone planned it that way, but because the math only ever pointed in one direction: fewer humans in the room, fewer chances for the next outbreak to start. This isn't only a story about chickens either. The same remove the human, remove the risk logic is already reshaping China's pig farming industry, where African swine fever has pushed similarly aggressive automation into hog production, and it's starting to show up in food processing facilities that handle anything capable of carrying a pathogen between species. Chicken farming just happens to be the version most people can actually picture, because almost everyone watching this has eaten a chicken raised on a farm that looked exactly like the one in front of you right now. The strangest part isn't that the farm in front of you has no people in it. It's that, within a few years, that might be the version you'd actually feel safer buying from.